Akagi Kaga, Carrier Division 2, which is here Soryu, Carrier Division 5, which is Shokaku, and the Zuikaku. Those were the 6 carriers that were participated in the attack on Pearl Harbor. Carrier Divisions 3 and 4 were not involved, and I'll explain that on the tail codes of the airplanes in a few minutes. Each one of these ships could hold 69 combat-ready airplanes. Therefore, total strength when they left Japan on November 26, 1941, 414 combat airplanes on 6 carriers. And here's the carrier divisions. First carrier division was Akagi Kaga, identified by red bands. Kaga airplanes had 2 red bands around the fuselage. Akagi had 1 red band. The same for here, Soryu in blue, and the 5th division, which is Shokaku and Zuikaku in white. So this is this is nerd stuff for model builders like me. When you want to make a bunch of models, but you want them all to be a little different than the next. So this is stuff that's all of interest to me. It's really historically not a big deal. But anyway, yeah. So each ship had a complement of zeros on them. I think in the first wave they launched 183 airplanes. In the first wave, 43 of them were the Zero Fighter. The other airplanes that the Japanese had, there's a very nice artwork of one from the Kaga. You can see on the tail it says A Roman numeral 2. Carrier Division 1 was A1 and A2 for Akagi Kaga. Carrier Division 2 was B1, B2. And Carrier Division 5 was E1, E2. So for those different, you can identify by looking at an airplane which carrier it's from if you just do a little bit of memorization. Not too different than the system the U.S. Navy had, with the colored markings and all that for various assignments on ship. But as your basic Garden Variety Model 21-0, the ones that flew at Pearl Harbor were not green. With the gray underside, they were all a light, what Mitsubishi called an ash green. And then for shipboard operations, the Navy sprayed this clear lacquer over it, which over time would turn a light brown color. And they used to call it Amehiro, because it was, I guess there's a candy in Japan, it's a caramel candy, it's called Amehiro, and that was what they called the color of the paint. So these are actually kind of brownish looking, that's how they were, because of the salt corrosion protection that was put on the shipboard airplanes. A lot of the airplanes that stayed on land base didn't need it. Okay, this is what the Japanese Navy has at disposal on December 7th. The top one is the Zero. And that's an A6M2 Model B, which is a 21, which is the most common, at that time, the most common manufactured version. The next airplane is a Aichi D3A1, later Allied code named VAL. This was a dedicated dive bomber. It was Type 99. It was called Type 9. Does anybody in here understand the Japanese calendar system from back then? The Japanese calendar, you probably know, Japanese calendar system, 2600. The year 2600 Japanese calendar was the Western year 1940, the Christian year 1940. So when you look at Japanese equipment that was made in the 1930s, you'll look at something like the Type 99 or Type 97. That means that these aircraft or this military equipment entered service in 1937 or 1939 and so on. Type 0. The reason the Zero Fighter is called Reishiki Center Type 0 is because that is the year that it was accepted by the Imperial Japanese Navy and put into service. First flew in 1939, but its actual debut in service with the Navy was 1940. And this is why it's called Type 0. Of interest, there's also another Mitsubishi Zero. It's a float plane. They call it an F1M. It's an observation float plane. It's also a Mitsubishi product. It's also a Type 0 because it was introduced in 1940, but it's not all the same plane. There's another Aichi design called the E-13, which is an observation float plane. They also called it Type 0. Something that the Japanese Army, I've got Navy, all this stuff right here on over to the right is Navy, and then there's the Pearl Harbor attackers there. This is all Army. Instead of the Army going Type 0, Type 00, they call it Type 100. And that was what the Army did, just a little different nomenclature than what the Navy used. And most historians know that the Japanese Army and the Japanese Navy were not on the same page for most of the war, and that was part of the problem for them. In any case, A6M2 D3A1 dedicated dive bomber, B5N2 Nakajima Type 97 carrier attack airplane. First one has a level bombing configuration. This is a 800 kilogram or 1,760 pound bomb that was made from a Japanese field artillery gun. It was converted over. This is what was going to be used at high altitude over Battleship Row with an expert bomb sight and precision bombing. This is one of the airplanes, this type of airplane is one that took out the Arizona because it was a high level bomb. The bottom version, which is also the B-5N2 Type 97, this has a torpedo configuration. This has the Mark 91 or Type 91 aerial torpedo that was absolutely excellent. The Japanese were probably about 6 to 8 years ahead of us on torpedo technology. Our Mark 13 torpedo was a piece of junk compared to this. This could be launched over 200 knots. Ours had to be brought down to 110 knots. And you can imagine what happened to all the TBDs at Midway. They tried to attack the Japanese ships. They were cannon fodder. They had the ships shooting at them. They had the Cap Zeros coming over them. They had no chance because our torpedo had to be launched so slowly. So for years it took to Americans to redevelop the torpedo. Japanese Type 91 was an excellent torpedo from the onset. The Japanese studied the British attack at Toronto in Italy the year before. It's a shallow harbor. They knew the water was very shallow, same with Pearl Harbor. The Japanese basically took, the Navy took those torpedoes and they added wooden blocks on the fins. And it's well represented in the movies. They did that to keep the torpedo from porpoising, to keep it level when it's dropped. Obviously it was effective, it worked. Also, if you look, these are all from the carrier Akagi. Again, A1 is the prefix on the tail. And if you look, the 0 has a number that starts with 100. The bow has a number that starts with 200, and the Capes have a number that starts with 300. This was a designator for the different Japanese naval aircraft. And the airplane, first from bottom, third one down. This is the airplane of, what was his name that did the attack? The guy from Wounded Tiger. Fujita. No, Minoru Fujita? Yeah, he was the commander of the entire, he was basically the CAG of that attack. That was his airplane, A1301. I've got a model of it over here. The Cape. That's a 3-man airplane. Basically, you've got either a torpedo man, a pilot, a torpedo man, a radio man. In this case, you had a bomb aimer. But they're resourceful in converting this airplane over to multiple duty, either torpedo or level bomber. They did a good job with that. This is probably about 5:45 a.m. on December 7th, Hawaiian time, December 8th, Japanese time. This is the Akagi. The first wave of A6Ms are starting up. And I've shown this picture before at the Japanese events here. I love this photo because the natural metal propellers that they had on those shining against the sun, and you can see the two red stripes on the props going around. It reflected. It's a beautiful picture. This must have been just at sunrise, just right around sunrise. I would say probably about 5:45 because they launched properly at 0600. The trip to Oahu would take about an hour and a half, a little bit longer than that at cruise speed because the Zeros, even though they were faster than the other attack airplanes, had all cruise at a given fuel economy and speed, so they could, get there and have enough fuel to do the attack and loiter around for a little while. So, yeah, about an hour and a half flight for them. They parked the carriers about 230 miles north of Oahu Island, and that was basically where they staged from. This is a very grainy, crude picture of AI-108 taking off the Akagi again. Most of the pictures I have here are from the Akagi. This is also the Akagi. These are D3As. The bow of interest is the airplane in the back hadn't even started its engine yet, neither is this one. And this is from the Shokaku. Single white stripe on the fuselage. This is again that morning. This picture is interesting because it's 1-0 and then the rest are B-5Ns behind it. So I'm sure a couple of the airplanes probably already left the deck when they got this one staged to go. The weather wasn't that good. They had a lot of problems. They on the way from Japan all the way to Hawaii, they encountered a lot of heavy seas, and they had to tie the airplanes down and keep an eye on it and all that. It was, I guess it would have been about an 11-day journey for them because they left Japan on November 26th. So I guess that would be Japanese time, so maybe it was actually a 12-day journey for them. But in any case, they had some rough seas they encountered, and it was like our Doolittle raid. We went through the same type of thing with the weather and all that. This is the first one of the first pictures. This is taken from a Japanese Japanese aircraft. This is an observer taking a photo. This is Ford Island, viewed from the northwest, facing, the picture is facing southeast. If you look real closely in this photo here, see if I get the laser, that looks to be what's a B-5N, Nakajima B-5N that had just made a torpedo run on one of the ships in Battleship Row. You also see the big water spout right off there. Probably he came in the direction towards the camera, released his torpedo, and then turned. But that looks like a B-5N to me with the size of the wing. I don't think it's a D-3A. The B-5Ns were tasked with the ships. And again, it was Allied Cook and Kate. This is a B-5N. They were tasked with the ships. The level bomber guys would be up high, pick them off. The torpedo guys would come in low. And then the Val dive bombers, they were going to go over to our airfield to make a mess of those. So that was the idea there. Most of the Kates were dedicated to ships parked at Ford Island here. That ship that the water spout is on, I believe, by looking at the diagram of how they were parked that day, how they were moored, I'm pretty sure. Let me see here. I've got two ships it could be. I'm not sure of either. Somebody might be able to clarify this. It's either the Oklahoma or the West Virginia. Considering how those were they were parked, it looks like it's one of those two that took the hit, the big water spout coming up just to the left of the plane. Anyway, interesting photo. There's a lot more pictures that were taken by the Japanese air crews as they were performing the task, including some motion pictures. I couldn't get all those on the PowerPoint due to time considerations, but you got to dig deep on the internet to find them. But they did some pretty good motion pictures and then taking out Catalinas and whatnot over the naval airfields as well. You guys wanted to document this is the Arizona. It's starting to sink. That was, again, you know the story. Level bomb went down the Arizona. It was a deck-piercing bomb. Went through, hit the magazine hold for the ammunition, and then the whole thing went up. And that's what killed the Arizona. This is one of the destroyers, the USS Shaw, taking a hit. And it looks similar to what would happen on the Arizona. Huge fireball because of probably ammunition storage. I do not know which ship this is. I'm ashamed. A lot of our battleships looked the same back then, but I don't know if that's the Arizona beforehand. I don't think so because Arizona got hit fairly early. It's obviously one of our other battleships, but again, I can't name it. I'm not going to BS you and tell you it's this ship when I don't know myself. So in any case, we'll just move on from there. You think this one right here is the West Virginia, the one with the 4 towers? Or no, 2 towers, the one in the foreground. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, of all the ships the Japanese damaged at Pearl Harbor, they damaged 8 of our battleships. We know what happened to the Arizona. It took 1,100 men to a grave, okay? The Oklahoma was the other one that was actually technically sunk at Pearl Harbor. They raised it. And then in transit back to San Diego, the thing sunk in the Pacific. The other 6 battleships, we got them rebuilt and back into action the following year. Except I think for the either the Pennsylvania or the West Virginia, that was 1943 before it went to battle. All the other ships, they got damaged there. Our steel workers and welders got those things back up and into combat by mid-1942. That's impressive because it's probably easier to repair a damaged ship than it is to build an all-new one. Of course, we were starting to build them anyway, but you know, just early 6 months of the Pacific War, we were really on the ropes. The Japanese were winning everywhere. You know, they couldn't lose. They had taken the Philippines and they had taken Malaysia and they had, you know, basically worked themselves into Southeast Asia, which is modern-day Vietnam. They were everywhere. And they had good control of the Pacific Rim at that time. It wasn't until the second naval air battle at Midway when things started to turn towards the U.S. And that battle, if you analyze the battle, I mean, how many people have never seen that movie? I haven't even seen it yet. Is it any good? I mean, I don't like CGI, but that's the only way you can bring old airplanes to life in large numbers. But it's chronologically correct. Oh, good. Because, you know, Hollywood, you know how they do things. It's all about shock effect and fantasy and love stories before it's factual. So anyway, I'm glad to see that Midway was done right. I'm probably going to see it with my wife next Tuesday. So I'm a little late on the scene. I know it came out last month. But the original Tora, which was done by 20th Century Fox in 1970, was an American and Japanese collaboration. And that is still to this day the most factually accurate film on the attack on Pearl Harbor. Chronologically correct, the orders of things are correct. Yeah, you need T6s to play zeros. It's okay, at least it's painted correctly. You know, so I mean, that was a really great movie. Excellent movie. B-17C at Hickam, no explanation needed there. P-40. That one looks like a lot of shrapnel damage, actually. Another P-40. I believe this is the actual airplane that was restored and is flying in England now. I believe Stephen Gray. I'd have to have one of our museum people give me more info, but that was an actual Pearl Harbor survivor, that airplane that is flying today, P-40B. And then this is another P-40. You know, they just burned to death. I mean, they just bombed them and, you know, strafed them and things lit on fire. Probably had fuel in them, gasoline in them, aviation fuel, and they just roasted. There's a Catalina. Yeah, half its wing is gone. Just a few pictures of the aircraft. This was a SB-2U-3 Vindicator from Marine Squadron 241. This is probably an Ewok field. And I think it's burned. You can see the skeletal frame there. It's a little aftermath of it. When I first saw this picture on the internet, it was about this big, I said, hey, wait a minute, they don't make P-38s at Pearl Harbor. And all of a sudden I looked close, I said, holy cow, I said, there's 5 or 6 carcasses of P-40s just sitting there. So these are all P-40B or C models, the early ones. Okay, these are second lieutenants, Welch and Taylor. And Welch is the one on the right, Taylor's the one on the left. These are 2 of 5 U.S. Army Air Corps pilots that got airborne that day to defend Pearl Harbor. Again, backing up, the airfields were bombed by the Aichi Val dive bomber, Type 99 dive bomber, and they were strafed by the Mitsubishi Zeros, who were also flying combat air patrol. The job of the Zero that day was to keep American planes on the ground. Or they keep them on the ground, or keep them away from the bombers if they get airborne. That's, you know, basically they were combat air patrol fighters. These guys woke up from an all-night of partying. There had been a card game going on. There had been a lot of boozing going on. And they woke up and they said, hey, the airfields are getting attacked. So I believe these guys were at, what was the airfield? There's so many of them. Wheeler. And then their Wheeler was under such heavy attack, they called Halewa, and they said, get 2 of our P-40s armed and fueled. And they got in a vehicle, the guys were probably hung over, still in their night clothing, and got to the airfield and got those P-40s, actually got up and got some kills. Now the Japanese sent 2 waves on this attack. The first wave was comprised of 183 airplanes. Most of the damage to the ships was done on the first wave. The second wave, the Japanese left at 9 in the morning on the first wave. 15 minutes later, over Oahu came the second wave. And the second wave was 147 airplanes. And they came in and did more dive bombing and strafing on the airfields. And that's when these guys actually got up. They got airborne. It was during the second wave. So this is George Welch and Kenneth Taylor. And they're both from the 47th Pursuit Squadron. At the time, they were flying what was a pretty new airplane, the P-40 Model B, which at the time was probably the most modern single-engine fighter that our U.S. Army Air Corps had in its inventory. The P-38 wasn't really combat ready yet or delivered in large numbers. The P-39 was kind of passed over. The P-36 was already being phased out in favor of the P-40. It was basically a P-36 airframe with a different engine. Anyway, these guys, they got up that morning. They did 2 sorties that day. They got up and got a few kills and then came back down. Between these 2 guys, I think Welch on the right got 4 and Taylor got 3. And they're a mixture of the Cape, Val, and the Zero. They're a mixture of all 3 different types of airplanes.